Thanks for tuning into our seller interview series. Up today, we've got an affiliate site in the medical education niche making just under $4,000 a month in net profit. The listing number for this is 40084. Now, we do these interviews to give potential buyers more information about the seller and the sites they're looking to purchase. We hope these insights are helpful for you in making a buying decision. We've got Matt with us today to go through the site and cover everything from niche selection to traffic and monetization. Thanks for coming on, Matt.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, man, can you tell us a little bit about your background in building and running these types of sites?
Sure. I've been doing affiliate marketing for almost 4 years now. Kind of got into it at a period of time while I was actually unemployed, and I just kind of stumbled into it. A friend of mine was getting into doing AdSense sites at that time and told me he thought it was something that maybe I wanted to look into. So I got the AdSense 100K blueprint, which was a popular product a few years ago. And it kind of laid out the whole approach for keyword research and assessing competition and how to do on-page optimization, how to get links, the whole deal. So I did AdSense sites for about a year. And then after about a year, because I was targeting mostly education keywords, about after a year, I kind of realized I was in the wrong part of the food chain and I should be doing lead generation. And that's what I've been doing the last 3 years. So basically I build micro-niche affiliate sites that do lead generation. Pretty much is the majority of what my business is.
It's interesting that you moved up the value chain a bit, because you're right in that AdSense is generally a lower form of monetization, and it doesn't take a whole lot more to take an AdSense site and turn it into a lead gen site, especially depending on the niche that you're in. What made you go after medical education niche? It's really lucrative, and so there's some of our more popular sites. What made you get into that a couple of years ago?
Well, what it was essentially I was interested in vocational education and kind of the trend towards, particularly in the U.S., there being more and more support for growth in vocational training, just because kind of, the old model of people going to a 4-year college and getting a degree and everything for a variety of reasons isn't quite working out the same way as it used to in the past, with student loan debt and harder to get jobs. So I was doing a lot of keyword research looking into vocational training because I was kind of interested in it, and because I was in AdWords and seeing that the CPCs were pretty high for, keywords related to different types of training and certification programs. And while I was doing that, really quickly focused in on the fact that obviously the search terms within vocational training that had by far the highest volumes and the best CPCs for the most part were all allied health and nursing, things like that. So kind of doing keyword research and sifting through all the different things out there, I focused in on the particular niche that this site's in as part of that process.
It's funny, I was telling you a little bit before the show that, about a couple of years ago, I was looking to build an authority site, and I narrowed it down to a few niches, and this is exactly one of the niches I was looking at. So it's definitely heavily keyword-based in terms of, potential opportunity in searches and potential opportunity in clicks and kind of the traffic and the excitement that's going on. And I really like it because of the long-term prospects. If you look at the job markets over the next couple of years, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity here. Let's talk about how it's monetized. Now, this site was actually listed with us before, primarily under Quinstreet, and there was a bit of a problem with the earnings, with the advertisers that were on that side, and you had to switch it up. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, basically what happened, just to kind of set the stage here, it's been monetized with Quinstreet since it launched. About 90% of its revenue over the last 2 years has come from leads through Quinstreet. Towards the end of the summer, the conversion rate started to slow down a bit, and there was obviously fewer schools listed through Quinstreet that offer training in this particular niche. So basically, through the process of talking to my rep there and seeing what was going on with competitors and actually looking at the listings coming up on the pages on the site, I was able to determine that they'd lost quite a bit of their inventory. The number of schools they work with that offer this particular training program had dropped off dramatically in the span of about a month. And it turned out what it was a large nationally known chain of schools. I don't know if I should say the name, but they got into quite a bit of trouble with the government over the summer, and they started to close down a lot of their campuses. These were a lot of the schools that were buying leads for this particular niche from Quinstreet. So what I did was I switched over to Campus Explorer, which is a competitor to Quinstreet. There's still some Quinstreet listings on the site, but it's primarily monetized with Campus Explorer now, and the result has been basically it's been a negligible change in revenue from where it was before. It's Campus Explorer's performed really well on there. They're working with different schools, but they have a lot more coverage at this point in this particular niche than Quinstreet does.
Actually, now it did take a bit of a hit or whatever, and then the earnings went down briefly. But I actually think it's a positive, probably, that you're able to find an alternative affiliate provider that brought the earnings back to what they were before. It goes to show that you're not just stuck with Quinstreet. And that's funny because, historically, with the sites we've sold and our customers, like Quinstreet has been fantastic for them. So, like you're saying, if this one particular school was having some issues and we're no longer, giving, I think, Quinstreet the value for the leads that they were before, that kind of makes sense. Why did you keep Quinstreet and AdSense on the site? Like, why not just go fully Campus Explorer? Aren't you losing money? When someone clicks the AdSense ad, wouldn't you prefer that to be a lead for Campus Explorer?
You would, but the way I have the AdSense on there, it's pretty much at the bottom of the heat map as like one of the last things they're going to see before they bounce or go to a different page or whatever. And it really, I've tried it both ways. When I first launched the site for about the first 6 months, it had no AdSense on it. And really my conversion rate, the click-through rate on the Quinstreet widget and now Campus Explorer and everything is basically identical to what it was. So the AdSense has kind of just been found money, if you will. It doesn't really seem to me like it's affected the click-throughs that I'm getting. The percentage of the visitors that are actually going into the lead form is the same.
So this might be a position where, they're scrolling down the page. They're probably going to bounce. So you might as well have them click through. Either try to suck them in and click them through to another page on the site so they hang out for a bit, or send them to AdSense so you can get paid a little bit since they're going to be exiting anyway. If something grabs their attention, they can click through and then head over there, and at least you're still getting paid for some of that exit traffic. Okay, got it.
Yeah. I mean, with the monetization on there, AdSense is a total afterthought. So
yeah, and it's very small percentage of that. So talk to me a little bit about why you're selling this. Why are you selling the site instead of keeping it and growing it with Campus Explorer?
Well, basically what my strength is, as I've learned to do this, is identifying niches and building micro-niche sites. And, I've been doing that at a pretty good volume. I actually have a couple partners, and we've built a pretty good number of sites spread out over a whole bunch of different niches. But as I've kind of joked, I see that as my strength, not being a site shepherd where I want to manage a whole bunch of sites. That's just not something I'm particularly interested in, and it's not necessarily, it doesn't match my skill set. So this one is a site that we've had for a couple of years. It's a good, solid earner. We really haven't put any work into it. It's been pretty much on autopilot this whole time. So we kind of felt like this would be a good one to sell as we start to try to, pick and choose which sites we want to keep working on and developing and which ones we want to just kind of move off to, raise some capital to do other things.
Do you and your partners just build sites from scratch, or do you also buy and sell?
We're just building sites.
Gotcha.
That's kind of been... This is actually my first foray into selling sites with you guys.
Cool. Okay. And what's the plan for the cash when you sell? Are we doing a trip to Tahiti? Are we reinvesting this in building out new sites? Or where are we at with this?
I actually have some other online stuff I'm interested in investing in, but it's going to require a little bit of startup capital, some non-lead generation stuff. So I'm going to use it for that. But I'm also going to use a little bit of it and take some time off because I'm actually planning to go back to school later next year. So I've got a couple different plans for what I would do with it.
Without giving too much away in terms of your online stuff, are we talking like a SaaS? Are we talking startup? What are we looking at there?
No, just a different model. Just doing some more retail-focused stuff.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Stuff.
Cool. I have a buddy in the drop shipping space. His name's Anton, does the drop ship lifestyle stuff, and he's got, it's pretty hot. Some people are saying that drop shipping is absolutely dead. Amazon's been crushing it, but then, it's just funny. People were telling us that AdSense was dead when we started too. So I think
that's true.
Yeah, there's always opportunity, even when everyone's like, oh, this is dead. Drop shipping's dead. E-commerce is dead. Amazon has crushed them, and there's still people out there doing millions of dollars worth of business there too. So tell me a little bit about like the site when it was built. It was built back in January 2013. How did it look? How did it come out of the gates? Was it like an awesome earner 2-3 months in, or was it like a slow burn? How did it start off?
It started off pretty fast. I think the launch was more around mid-February actually, when we finally had all the content up. This was one of the first sites I built the specific intent of making it a lead generation site, because as I've mentioned, I was building AdSense sites and kind of hybrids where they were AdSense and lead generation. This one was initially built to be a super focused lead generation site. It started off, the first couple months, it didn't do a whole lot as we were just adding content and being pretty slow and deliberate with adding links, doing a little bit of light social media. But by May, about 4 months after launch, it jumped up to where it was number one for two of its primary keywords. And it was cranking for several months up until hummingbird. And then things all kind of got jumbled up just because, not necessarily because there was anything wrong with the approach that I was using for the site or the optimization, but just because of the way Hummingbird processes queries. Some of the pages that had been ranking no longer ranked as high. And as we discussed, all of the traffic, almost, 80-something% of it is coming from organic search. So if you have a fluctuation in your rankings for a few keywords, it can cause a pretty significant change in your traffic. So it started off really cranking the first few months, and then it kind of leveled off after Hummingbird, and it's been at the point where it's at right now for over a year.
Okay, so it's been relatively stable in terms of earnings. It's making a little over 4,000 gross, a little under net. What have you tried with the site that just didn't work? Have you done any content strategies or any monetization strategies? You're like, I can't wait to try this out, and it just didn't didn't happen.
It really hasn't happened. I mean, we in the very beginning, I was trying to generate a lot of traffic with social media. We were getting some traffic, but we weren't getting the conversions, just because I find, with certain niches, social media traffic is great, and you do get good conversion. But with lead generation for something like education, it just doesn't seem to necessarily translate as well. So at that point, there are a couple social media properties that are part of this listing, but they've been kind of dormant for over a year because we just basically weren't really feeling we were getting the ROI from the time and money that we were spending on using them, so we kind of backed away from them.
So you were looking
I would say social media.
Yeah, you were looking at social media. You were saying, okay, I think we can get some good conversions via social media. You were doing it, and it just wasn't taking off. It definitely wasn't a great ROI on your time.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so what have you tried with a site that just did work? It was, you said, wow, I'm definitely going to use this on future sites I build. This was a really good strategy. I'm going to keep this in the back of my head and make sure I use this again.
Well, basically the whole template of how it's laid out and designed has worked really well. Everything from the theme to the way the different elements are laid out on the page converted at a very high rate, performed very well on search. The on-page optimization, I kind of have a standard format of how I do on-page optimization with most of my sites, mixing in some LSI and where I use keywords and the different meta tags, things like that. And this site was one of the first of this newer generation of sites that I started building when I really just focused in. Most of what I did, I'm still doing because it worked.
Many of the sites you built later on were kind of based on this template then. So this one worked for you, and then you started building out other sites that were similar, like looking similar, and kind of like the conversions and kind of the layout of the site was similar to this.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, so in terms of, let's talk a little bit about the traffic and earnings here. So it's heavily organic. We're saying 80% plus is organic. Do you have any referral, direct, or any further social traffic? I know you're giving that a shot, but do you have any today?
Very little. It's like less than 10% of the visits to the site. It gets some from some of the Google Plus page seems to send some, a little bit from Facebook, but it's very minimal.
Gotcha. Okay. What percentage of the earnings are coming from Campus Explorer versus Quinstreet versus AdSense today?
Well, I just have the last month really to compare the two, but at this point, it looks like it's going to end up right around 70% of the revenue from leads is coming from Quinstreet. It's still, the leads versus AdSense is still over 90% of the revenue is from leads. AdSense is a very small percentage. It's just a couple $100 a month, really. And about, like I was going to say, about 70% of the revenue from leads for this first month is from Campus Explorer.
Okay. You're still getting some from Quinstreet, and it's something you might go back to, or, the new buyer could go back to, assuming they get their educational institution problem figured out. So for now, Campus Explorer and Quinstreet is definitely something that can be open later. We talked about the stability of earnings a bit, and there's a 12-month profit and loss that will go to any depositor that puts a refundable deposit down the site, so they're going to get all of that background history, and they can kind of see where everything's been. How much content is on the site right now, Matt?
Got 173 pages, not a lot for a site as old as it is, and actually over the last year, I've probably added fewer than 10 new, well, I wouldn't say the last year, but the last 6 months definitely, fewer than 10 new posts. doesn't get updated as much as it should. It's been somewhat neglected, and it's still done great because of the link building that I've done, which even that's very minimal. It hasn't been really content intensive, the upkeep of the site. There's definitely some opportunity there if someone wants to do that and do some content marketing with it. The site is a great foundation for that already.
We did put some costs in there in terms of content. How much, kind of a minimum level, how much content would need to be added by the new buyer, do you think, to keep it keep it rolling?
One new post per month, one decent length post, 1,000-word post, maybe a little bit more per month. And then, maybe just do some light social media and stuff to promote the post. Just enough to where it's sending out signals that the site's active and it's being updated.
Gotcha. All right, let's talk a little bit about some opportunities, Matt, for the site. So if I'm the buyer and I'm buying the site and I wanted a really non-risky path to growth, I wanted a nice, stable growth cycle, what would you suggest I do? Would it be adding content? Would it be link building? What should I focus on for a non-risky path to growth?
For low risk, I would I'd focus on content, and I would probably focus on geo-targeted long-tail keywords to start. Really focusing on training programs in specific cities. Doing that, you could get away without even really having to write a whole lot. You just would have to use data effectively on the site, build HTML tables that list out the actual schools that offer these programs in each state, phone numbers, that type of stuff. You can find that from a variety of sources online. I would do that because those types of pages with a site that's a couple of years old and has some authority in the niche, those will rank pretty high and get you some additional traffic that converts pretty well for you.
I like that.
So I would do that.
Even if they're getting a couple hundred searches a month or so, if you have that there, you have it there long term, and it's easy to get ranked in the geo-targeted search. I think those are great pages. And that's one of the things I love about these types of sites is that there's a ton of opportunity there. You can do different keywords in different cities. And so that combination gives you a lot of content opportunity.
Absolutely. And all the additional traffic you can get is going to make a very noticeable difference in earnings because, as I've mentioned a couple times, this niche converts really well. I mean, my actual conversion rate for unique visitors who turn into leads is close to 3%. So if you can get another 100 visitors a day, even, that could turn into a very significant amount of extra earnings.
So if the conversions are already figured out, now it's just getting traffic to it. You would, for slow growth or for less risky growth, you go for additional content. If I were incredibly risky and I wanted to take a real stab at this, I want to double or triple it inside of 6 months or 12 months, what approach would you have me take? What are some slightly more risky ways that I could really take a stab at building this into a monster?
I would lean more towards link building, off-page SEO. If I had a PBN or access to links that I could build at any type of scale from fairly trusted sources, you could target several of the keywords in this niche that it's in, particularly the online keywords, and you could really blow the site up. I mean, if you can get up to the top 3 for the online keyword, for instance, that is worth a couple $1,000 extra a month just by itself easily.
Gotcha.
So the site was up better ranking for that.
There's some high volume keywords in this space for sure. Let me ask you, because you've avoided the PBNs yourself, we were talking about this before the show, is that just not a path that you're willing to take? I know some people took some hits on PBNs recently. Is that something you're just I don't want to deal with the headache and the hassle of getting hit with that?
I was really tempted to build a network and had given it a lot of thought for a while and just hadn't quite been up to taking on the scope of the challenge. And then as time has gone on and I've started to see people have problems with them, it kind of made me shy away from them. As Google started to actively target de-indexing PBNs. I know they absolutely still work. That's why Google's targeting them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was basically something that I didn't have access to one. I was definitely seeing competitors use them to great effect, but hadn't built my own network, had given it some thought, and then as time has gone by, I've seen, the risk involved and just decided, maybe.
That's funny. You were interested in it. You're like, that's a pretty good idea. My competitors are using it. They're having some success. You're like, I'll do it later. You can procrastinate on it and figure it out. And then you're like, maybe it's a good thing I didn't build those up. Maybe that's positive for me.
Yeah, it was procrastination, but it was also just kind of trying to figure out how I would execute it. And,
yeah,
it's a big undertaking.
Yeah, no doubt. So let's talk a little bit about, we talked about the opportunities here. Let's talk a little bit about the risks. What do you think are the largest risks for a potential buyer with this particular site?
The largest risk are really just the standard things that you would have with any site that gets most of its traffic from organic search. fluctuations in the rankings that it has right now, which could come from a change to the algorithm or a competitor entering the space who's being, really aggressive. That said, this site's been in this space for 2 years, and this is a pretty burn and burn niche, it seems. You'll see a lot of competitors come and go, and this is actually one of about 2 or 3 sites that I've seen that has stayed in the top 10 for most of the big value keywords over the last 2 years. Just because, as I've kind of said, I've been pretty conservative with it. It does well, but the metrics for visitors staying on page and clicking through to different pages on the site, all the other things that people look at, which I believe are probably part of Panda, those are all pretty good for this type of site. And, it's stayed pretty steady while there's all this chaos around it of people who are really heavily abusing private blog networks and things like that, and they'll have a good run of a few months and then they get wiped out.
Matt, do you have any idea what percentage of the traffic comes from a less than 5 keywords, and what percentage of it comes from the longer tail geo-targeted stuff? I'd be interested in that. Is it mostly from a couple high value keywords, or is it really spread across the board?
No, it's really spread out. As I mentioned, when the site was new and it was 3-4 months old, it was getting most of its traffic from the top 3-4 keywords. Since things have kind of leveled out, now the majority of it comes from all kinds of long tail stuff that I don't even track. I mean, I'd look at it in SEMrush and I pull the reports and that, and I had no idea that it was ranking for some of this stuff,
I view that as a positive. I mean, if it's getting traffic from more keywords, that's a benefit, I think. And for sites where it's only a few keywords, that's one of my recommendations, to make sure that you're building out the long tail stuff so that you can balance that out. Try to get at least 50% of it from, the wider, broader range of keywords so that you're not so reliant on 1, 2, 3 keywords, that kind of thing. Let's talk a little bit about the work required. Now, how much work are you doing on this? If I just want to be in maintenance mode, how much work is required? What do I need to do with this website?
It takes me just a couple hours a month, really. I mean, sporadically adding new content. As I said, it hasn't been monthly. It's been every couple months. So however long it would take you if you're going to build the content yourself, or if you're just going to buy it out, however long it takes you to put up a new post and, do your formatting or whatever. And then other than that, the thing that I actually spend the most time every month on is competitive link analysis, looking at other competitors and their backlink portfolio and trying to find prospects for new links I can add. It takes a couple hours, really. That's pretty much all.
Someone with some SEO background, I think, would have an opportunity with this. But let's say that my background isn't as much SEO, but I actually like the niche or the industry. I'm more into that. How long do you think it would take me to get up to speed in the medical education niche? Is it important to do that if you're writing out the content yourself, or if you're going to be ordering it? How important is it that you understand the niche?
I don't think it's very important at all because, you can buy out general stuff from people that do have a background in this area for pretty cheap on, Odesk and some of the other sites where you can find writers. So I don't think that would be the problem. I would guess if someone didn't have an SEO background and this is all kind of new to them, where they may struggle a little bit more as a link acquisition part, they could certainly outsource that. If they want to do it themselves, there would be a bit of a learning curve, but depending on how much they like to pull data and analyze it, it's not,
That's not the most exciting part of entrepreneurship or web entrepreneurship, that's for sure.
Right. It takes a certain type of person.
I think an SEO pro could come in here and probably really go through the site and tighten it up. I think someone that's not an SEO pro, your best bet would be just slow burn, long-term content and really build this out into a powerhouse that way. Let's talk a little bit about, for a potential buyer that's looking at this, one of my concerns would be that you're going to start competing with me as soon as you sell this with 10 different sites targeting the same exact keywords. Would you be open to a non-compete, at least for the specific terms for this website?
For the specific terms, probably, yeah, not for the niche. I do have a couple of older sites that aren't really doing a whole lot that are in the same space, but they're not targeting the same exact keywords.
Okay.
In the broad area they are. But yeah, I wouldn't, at this point, as I kind of mentioned, I'm interested in doing some different stuff and putting my time and energy into that. So that probably wouldn't be a problem because I don't intend to go in and build a replica of the site or anything like that.
Gotcha. Okay. How much support are you willing to offer a potential buyer? If they take this over, how much do you think they're going to need to get this up and running, and how much are you willing to offer them?
I think I put this in the email, but 3 one-hour phone calls and email support for 30 days. I could do a little bit more than that if necessary, but I'll absolutely share everything I'm doing and all the ideas that I have for growing the site. If they're interested in pursuing that, not a problem.
Cool. Actually, I think this is a good pickup for someone that's relatively new. So I think that would be important in this particular instance. It depends on the buyer you get. I mean, you may end up with a buyer that's like, oh, no, I got it, blah, 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 I can take it over. And they don't require much support. But I want to make sure that someone that's new, is comfortable to getting this up to speed. Because I think it's actually a good fit for someone that's kind of just starting out with this stuff. Are you open to, let's say, a split or an earn out? Let's say that someone's willing to do 70% up front and 30% after the 30 days of training, something like that. Would you be open to that?
Yeah, I'm definitely willing to discuss that. As I mentioned, this is my first foray into selling sites, but I do have, as I also mentioned, I've got quite a few sites, so it's very likely at some point down the road I'm going to want to probably sell a couple more. So, I definitely am open to showing people that I'm available and letting them know that they can follow up with me, and I'm not going to disappear or anything like that after I sell a site. So, yeah,
cool.
Absolutely.
What we normally do is we help advise our sellers when they put the sites up on whether we think it's a good offer, kind of where they're sitting. And if the site's been up there for a long time, there hasn't been that much interest, then we kind of can guide them. But if we think that the site's going to sell relatively quickly or, for full price, then we let the sellers know, hey, probably not the best offer. You can hang out there and we're going to get this sold. Like for this one, for example, I think we're going to get pretty close to, if not at ask. So I don't think that would be too much difficulty. Let's do a kind of a wrap up really quick about the site. As I mentioned before, it was built in January. You said it was kind of wrapped up in February 2013. It's in the medical education space, specifically dealing with nursing. It has $3,859.52 in monthly net profit, and that's profit and loss over the last 12 months. We'll go with it. This is more recent. It's getting about 5,000 to 6,000 page views per month. And it's primarily monetized with Campus Explorer now. It has a little bit of Quinstreet and a little bit of AdSense as well. Matt, if you were going to give your best pitch to someone that was looking to buy this site and you were going to do it in 30 seconds, what would you let them know?
I'd tell them it's an ideal site for somebody who's looking for passive income because it has a very stable track record over the last year plus, where it's maintained its traffic and earnings with a minimum amount of time and money spent in its upkeep. And it's also ideal for someone who is interested in building it up and trying to be more aggressive with growth because it's already ranking pretty well for most of the big money keywords, and it has a lot of room where you could play off of the site's authority and add new content and get it to rank without too much trouble.
Awesome, Matt. Appreciate it. If you're listening to this or watching this and you want more information about the site, if you're on EmpireFlippers.com, feel free to browse the listing page that you're on, and then you can pay a refundable deposit on this to get all the information. If you're on YouTube or something like that, go ahead and click the link in the notes, and it'll take you to the listings. You can review the listing yourself. And thank you so much, Matt, and thank you for listening in.
Thank you very much.